seconds. You know, all this relates to alignment, and I think probably anybody watching this who's spent a lot of time, like you said, banging heavy weights and just grinding really hard, and you're in your ego. What are some examples of some ways that you can tap back into the heart, right? Because a lot of that is living in the mind, essentially. So how can we align back with opening the heart and being in that alignment?
Is going really heavy into sensation, going into, which is also much of the lover energy, but that is in a meditation, have a meditation where you're focused on sensation.
Yeah.
Or a movement practice where you're really focused on feeling what's happening.
Right.
But from that practice of being much more aware of sensation than before is feeling sensations. Finding those feelings that you normally would avoid. Because here's the thing is, at some point in our childhood, we encountered a feeling we never wanted to feel again. And so we created a personality, we created an identity, and we created coping mechanisms to avoid that feeling ever again.
Right.
And normally the feeling is, you know, being projected from one of our parents, our mother or father. And so, you know, my dad may say something to me, I take it a certain way, and so I was like, well, I guess I'll never do that again. And so what I do is I create a life where I avoid that type of situation, but what I'm really avoiding is the feeling that it created for me. And so now any situation in my life that looks like that ends up being a place, it becomes a weakness. So it's a survival tool when you're young, but when you become an adult, if you always avoid that situation, and you could be a weakling. In life at certain things. It's like, you know, I can't ask for a job promotion. I'm nervous to go to my boss. It's like, okay, you learned that. You learned that is going to create a feeling, and that's what you're avoiding. Right. So getting in touch with your heart is a very courageous experience, and it actually requires, the warrior has to be on board before the lover can come on board. Because it takes,
why is that?
The energy of the warrior is courage, and it cuts things away, and it goes into things that are hard, and feelings you've been avoiding for maybe 20 years.
Right.
Whoa. That'll really be challenging.
Yeah.
And it took me years, and I've had coaches, and I've helped people help me access that.
Right.
And it's a practice. I still, like, there's times where I go, oh, I think. So my mind, I know when a feeling is running, I'm avoiding, and there's a blind spot when my mind starts like chewing on things, and I'm like, oh man, I'm miserable. I go, oh, what's that feeling? Oh, it's right there. And learning to be curious about it and just letting it be and being okay with that feeling.
Yeah, right.
Kind of like a cold bath. It's like, you know, after a while, you're just good with a cold plunge.
Right. You can relax into the uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I recently learned is that vulnerability and courage are like closely tied, if not the same thing, right? Because in order to be vulnerable, which a lot of us can't be, you have to have a lot of courage to go into that vulnerability.
I would say if you're not experiencing fear, then it's not you're not actually vulnerable.
Right.
And like one of the things I've done is shared so much of things that used to scare the shit out of me for other people to know, like doing shadow work and something that I'm ashamed of, like, oh, I'm going to share something I'm ashamed with. It's not a, and the first time I share it, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then now I can talk about it. It's not a big deal. It's no longer a vulnerable share for me.
Right.
Now when other people hear it, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe he shared that. That's so, because it'd be intimate for them, you know? So what, an example?
Doesn't have to be too deep.
You know what? Well, I would say that a lot of times I'll meet guys, and I can tell that they're where they're around the relationship with sex is immature, and so what I can do is like share my experience of sex that it used to be a challenge for me. You know, right? And I would never want to share it because I'm afraid what people would think of me if I shared that. And I share that, and they're like, "Oh my God, like I deal with that too." But like, and then they're like more open to the conversation. It's like a lot of times it's like, but it's no longer a big deal for me,
right?
Because I realize that most people are so worried about themselves, they don't care about what's going on in my experience.
Yeah.
But they think it's a big deal that I just shared this. So it's actually a hack, and well, it's a coaching hack.
Yeah.
To get people to open up is like, oh, what do you think is vulnerable? And that can be a little inauthentic. Like if you're purposely using that as a manipulation tool to get people to open up.
Right.
But you know, in a coaching context where that's the job, then the permission is given. But it's vulnerable when there's like a
yeah.
And vulnerable means like I have fear around this.
Right.
It makes me vulnerable. Someone, I could display this information, and somebody could attack me for it, and it could hurt my feelings.
Right. Right. Yeah. I try to make a point to share anything that I was vulnerable in the past, even if it's something like super small, because we're all going through the same human experience. You know, we're unique, but everyone is experiencing like a majority of these vulnerabilities, and once you hear someone like you share it, it really takes the heaviness off of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you hear someone that you look up to be like, I used to struggle with this, you're like, oh shit, okay, like I guess everybody struggles with this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as big a deal as I'm like holding in here, you know.
Yeah. I fancy myself a permissionary. So
yeah.
go around the world giving people permission.
Dude, I love that.
Mike says it's okay. I guess I could do it. Right. Yeah. If you want to build a coaching business, if you want to be like Josh, you can go to thestrongcoach.com/strengthside, and we have our build program, which is really the nuts and bolts on how to build an online coaching business. So you'll save 15% when you use that link. That's thestrongcoach.com/strengthside. And if you want to dive into more topics like we did just now, more of that deep personal development, emotional resilience, and all that kind of stuff, you can check out my podcast, The Bledsoe Show.